Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, highlights from the annual Air and Space Forces Association's Air, Space, and Cyber Conference. We bring you news from a jam-packed 2024 event, including an address from the Secretary of the Air Force, who offers a frank assessment of the looming threat of the Chinese military. And the latest on the next big addition to the American Air Armada, autonomous unmanned fighters. Get an update on the status of the futuristic aircraft. Plus, Project Mutant? You heard it right. Find out how the Air Force Research Lab is taking inspiration from nature to create more maneuverable missiles. And top Air and Space Force leaders on the challenges their forces face today and in coming years. Hear about what's on the minds of top officials. It's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon. Coming to you from the floor of the Air, Space, and Cyber Conference, here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Diana Stancy. China, China, China. Those were the opening words of the keynote address from Secretary of the Air Force Frank Kendall at the 2024 Air, Space, and Cyber Conference, invoking the unseen presence in the presentation rooms and exhibit halls of the event. While the Air and Space Forces face a number of challenges for development and modernization in the coming years, virtually all of them come with a nod toward outpacing developing Chinese capabilities, officials said here this week. The references to the Indo-Pacific theater came right off the bat, with Kendall opening the Air and Space Forces Association's annual conference in D.C. by raising the specter of China. Here he is on that and other topics from the event.
China continues to push boundaries of acceptable behavior with aggressive actions directed towards its neighbors. Most recently, we've seen Chinese vessels intentionally ram Philippine Coast Guard ships and Chinese aircraft repeatedly violate Japanese airspace. The threat from China is increasing. I have instructed our briefers to stop referring to the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army as a future or emerging or potential threat. I've been closely watching the evolution of its military for 15 years. China is not a future threat. China is a threat today. The Chinese Communist Party continues to invest heavily in capabilities, organizations, and operational concepts designed specifically to defeat the ability of the United States and its allies to project power in the Western Pacific. China's extensive and growing space order of battle, both targeting sensors and counter space weapons, its massive inventory of weapons targeting our land and sea assets, especially air bases and aircraft carriers, and its increasingly sophisticated counter-air capability all pose serious threats today. The next generation air dominance family of systems. The overall family of systems comprising collaborative combat aircraft, or CCAs, the NGAD platform, and other associated programs is moving forward aggressively. We are going full speed ahead on the first increment of CCAs. Here at AFA, you will see full-scale mock-ups or prototypes of the aircraft being designed and built by the winners of the initial CCA competition, Anduril and General Atomics. Both of these aircraft will be flying in the near future, and at least one of them will be in our inventory in meaningful numbers in the next few years. General Wilsbach and others will be talking about the CCA contribution to air superiority later in the conference. The technology to support CCAs is maturing rapidly, as evidenced in part by my flight in an AI-controlled F-16 a few months ago. Just to be clear, there was also a very capable test pilot in that aircraft with me. But we did let the software fly the plane through about a dozen engagement scenarios, almost all of which were against another F-16. It was a pretty even fight. As I expect everyone here knows, we are reevaluating the NGAD platform design concept. The initial impetus for this was a concern over the affordability, both total program cost and high unit cost. As the Air Force Operational Committee looked at the design concept, which is essentially an F-22 replacement, concerns expanded to include the cost effectiveness of the operational concept, the implications of changes in the threat, the evolving nature of the most stressing operational environments and scenarios we have to plan for, and the maturation of technology, including the introduction of CCAs. We plan to move quickly to conduct the assessment for a variety of reasons, including industrial base impacts and the fact that both the FY25 and FY26 budgets still have to be finalized. But if we are ever going to make a change in the NGAD platform's requirements, now is the time to do so, before the next major contractual commitment and the commitment to proceed towards production. One thing I would like to make very clear: we are not walking away from the core United States Air Force function of providing air superiority. I'll say that again. We are not walking away from the core United States Air Force function of providing air superiority. Thank you. We are looking at what we need in order to achieve air superiority in a manner consistent with the increased threat, the changing character of war, the most cost and combat effective way. Our fifth operational imperative is all about forward air-based resilience. Our resilience is increasing as we speak. This operational imperative is less dependent on technology maturation or research and development activities. We started looking closely at electronic warfare for several reasons. First of all, we found it was a key enabler in almost every one of our operational imperatives. Second, most of our electronic warfare programs are platform-centric, so there wasn't a unifying focus on this area as a whole. My own experience suggested that this is a historically neglected area that can have oversized impact, but doesn't compete well in our internal budget battles relative to other priorities. We established a cross-cutting operational enabler study in this area to try to bring more focus and conscious consideration to electronic warfare. The role and prominence of electronic warfare in the war in Ukraine provided additional incentives. What the team discovered was incredibly important. We believe we can counter advanced adversary kill webs by integrating a combination of electronic warfare tools, operationalized cyber capability, and other elements. I'm excited to see us making fast progress on this mission area for the Department of the Air Force.
One big topic on everyone's lips at this year's Air, Space, and Cyber Conference were collaborative combat aircraft, or what are known as CCAs. Essentially, AI-powered drone fighter jets, the futuristic aircraft are increasingly important part of the emerging picture of a future Air Force. What if you could send pilotless fighters into the skies to wage battles and support manned aircraft? That's an option the Air Force is driving towards as fast as it can. For updates on the effort, we checked in with air warfare reporter Stephen Losey.
Here at the Air and Space Forces Association's Air Space Cyber Conference in National Harbor, Maryland, a big topic of conversation has been collaborative combat aircraft, or CCAs. These are drone wingmen powered by autonomous AI technology that the Air Force hopes to one day have fly alongside F-35s and even the future next-generation air dominance platform that is now in the works. The Air Force wants these CCAs to carry out a variety of missions, including strike missions, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, electronic warfare, or even to serve as decoys in battle. This is the first AFA conference to be held since the Air Force awarded contracts to Anduril and General Atomics to build the first batch of CCAs. And both companies have brought full-scale models of what they have in mind. Anduril calls their CCA Fury. General Atomics' version is called Gambit. General Atomics is taking inspiration for its CCA from another drone it's made called the XQ-67. The XQ-67 is built on a chassis structure that allows it to be easily adapted with different sensors or potentially other capabilities. General Atomics thinks that by using the same kind of easily adaptable structure, it can save money and produce CCAs a lot quicker and easier. General Atomics is eyeing an ambitious production schedule for their CCAs and wants to produce 8 to 10 Gambits a month, maybe even more. And they're pointing to their experience building other drones, such as the MQ-1 Gray Eagle, as evidence for why they can pull this off. As for Anduril, their selection for the CCA program is a sign of their growing importance in the defense industry. Their booth here is the largest they've ever had at AFA, and they have big plans to continue with this CCA program. They're talking about building a facility to increase the production of Fury drones and other systems. There's still a lot we don't know about CCAs, including how much they might cost, but the Air Force wants them to be a fraction of the F-35's cost. But Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall has made it clear that CCAs are going to be an integral part of the Air Force's fleet in the future, and their importance is growing as the threat from China continues to advance.
The overall family of systems comprising Collaborative Combat Aircraft, or CCAs, the NGAD platform, and other associated programs is moving forward aggressively. We are going full speed ahead on the first increment of CCAs. Here at AFA, you will see full-scale mock-ups or prototypes of the aircraft being designed and built by the winners of the initial CCA competition, Anduril and General Atomics. Both of these aircraft will be flying in the near future, and at least one of them will be in our inventory in meaningful numbers in the next few years.
But what we've seen here is only the beginning for CCAs. The Air Force is already working on a second increment that they promise will be more advanced than the first. And we should hear more about that in months to come. For Air Force Times and Defense News, I'm Stephen Losey.
When we come back, what is Project Mutant and how is it evolving a key sector of development for the Air Force Research Laboratory? Find out when we come back. If you heard that a military development agency was working on something called Project Mutant, what the heck would you think was going on? We wanted to know too, so we went to the show floor at the Air, Space, and Cyber Conference where the Air Force Research Laboratory had set up shop. We were kind of hoping for genetic experiments, but what they had was almost as intriguing. What if a missile could change its course mid-air, less like a rigid tube metal and more like, say, a Falcon or a Hawk? That question was the base of the work behind the emerging tech called Mutant, and we cornered the AFRL to tell us how it works. Check it out.
Hello, my name is Dr. Roy Mason. I am an aerospace engineer for the Air Force Research Laboratory. I'm part of the test engineering team. We work on design and system integration. Mutant stands for Missile Utility Transformation via Articulated Nose Technology. Mutant allows us to turn the head of the missile. You're able to turn tighter and turn faster. And so the best way to think about it is turning in a sports car versus turning in a bus. You can make better U-turns in a sports car than you can in a bus. And so that's what we are able to do with this technology: turn tighter, turn faster, turn better. The typical missile that you see, the control surfaces that are typically used in this design are canards, wings, and you have a tail fin. Tail fin is very standard, and then you'll have a combination of whether you're going to have canards or wings. The issue with that is that canards and wings are rigid structures that are at the forebody of the missile, and it affects the overall aerodynamics of the missile. It does provide benefits, which is why they're used, but there's also some negatives, such as parasitic drag, which is the drag that is induced by the presence of those external bodies. Our proposal is to remove those canards and remove those wings and rather install an active control surface. So we use the forebody as the active control surface. So by moving the nose of the missile, it replaces that type of maneuverability and the performance that you would have from the canards and from the wings. And because it's active, you're able, and it's active and conformal. And so when you need to have that maneuverability, you can articulate and get that. And then when you need to be streamlined, when you no longer need to move, and you're just going to fly at a cruising altitude, a straight shot, you can go back to just having a straight, streamlined body. Think about nature. Look at birds, look at beetles, look at butterflies. All those animals that fly do not have rigid wings. Everybody's wings move, everyone's flexible. But when you look at these vehicles and these flight vehicles, they're all rigid. Morphing means that we're creating surfaces that move. If you look at a falcon or a hawk, a bird of prey, when they're flying at their altitude that they're at, and they want to look at a prey, a rabbit on the ground, they don't just immediately turn their whole body, they just turn their head. And so if you look at how a hawk flies, as soon as it turns its head, the body starts to drift towards where its head is looking. And so by looking at how nature flies, we've incorporated those principles and mechanized it in existing vehicles. You know, it started with an idea. Hey, if we turn the head, will the whole body start to move? We tried it, it did. And so based on that, we're like, okay, well, with that principle, how can we harness that technology and improve what already exists? And that's what Mutant's all about. We've done one test so far. It's a sled test, which is where you put the missile on a sled and you shoot it down the track with a rocket motor at the back. And what that test showed us was that our articulation mechanism is very strong. It withstands the forces of the G's that it was pulling, almost lifting the sled off of the test track itself. We have started to work towards a second sled test, and that's going to be coming up pretty soon. That test will prove the other concepts that we have. So it's all about risk reduction, doing the little things, showing the little performance gains and boosts so that we can justify having a full-blown flight test. And so that's what we're doing right now, just hitting those little check marks. We did this first sled test. Let's do the second sled test. And from that, we'll be able to determine how close we are to our other goals. I think it's really cool that we're able to look at nature and be able to see how we can use what we've seen all around us to improve our defense capabilities, improve our technology. And I can tell you for one thing for sure is that we're not going to stop there. Right now we're articulating ahead. Tomorrow we can figure out how we're going to articulate something else. But I think using nature as our guide, seeing what ultimately has worked for thousands of years, and then being able to make it real life into technology that we need for us to be an effective country and have that and maintain that air dominance, I think it's pretty cool, and I'm glad to be working on something like that. And I can't wait to see where we're going to go from here.
After the break, our financial expert from Navy Federal Credit Union is back with advice on how to separate your business and personal finances. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Okay, you've got a business selling garden gnomes on the side, and that's great. But how do you keep your business expenses from mixing with your personal ones? Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union is here with tips on how to do it right.
For small business owners, separating your personal finances from your business is a must. In the short term, you might think it's easier to maneuver from your personal account, but it could end up costing you time and money, especially at tax time. As a business owner, you have to file a separate tax return for your business anyway. So separating your income makes for a good business practice, saving you time during tax season and providing legal protections should the IRS come calling. But where to start? First, set up a legal business entity, whether it's a sole proprietorship, a partnership, or a corporation, and apply for an employer identification number, or EIN, from the IRS. Think of your EIN like a social security number for your business. Then open a business checking account and credit card. These will make it easier to pay bills, deposit checks, track profits and losses, and help you document expenses. With your personal finances separated from your business, you can clearly assess your performance and steer your biz towards success.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more coverage of military and defense topics, launch a surveillance drone to target militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to be the smartest guardian in the command center, sign up for our early bird brief, compiled each morning to bring you the most recent headlines. Lastly, if social media is where you collect open source intelligence, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. And just like most junior troops, we're on TikTok, so go find us there as well. When we come back, more from the 2024 Air, Space, and Cyber Conference. Hear from top leaders about the issues they're tackling on the immediate horizon. Here's the conundrum. You have a weapons and force development system in which it takes decades to produce new, exquisite combat platforms, and you suddenly need to keep up with technology updates moving 5 times that fast. How do you modernize your acquisitions process to adapt to that environment? It's a problem facing forces across the military. For insight on how the Air and Space Forces are doing it, a panel of top officials was on hand at the AFA 2024 event to discuss the topic. Here's some of what they had to say.
In your all's mind, what is it that's going to make this so hard, given the current context that we're in? Modernization is not a new thing. We've been doing it for a long time, pretty successfully. Why now? What is it that's going to make it so hard?
So I think the Secretary hit on a lot of the key points here of what is making modernization so hard. So I'm going to come at it from a Space Force perspective, but it kind of resonates across the entire DAF. For the Space Force, first of all, we are the smallest service. We have the smallest budget and the largest AOR. And we are starting behind the power curve with kit that was optimized for a benign environment. So we have nothing in front of us but a vertical curve. In order to get up that vertical curve, we need two things. We need people and we need money. And right now, being the smallest service, we're struggling to get the resources we need to do the modernization that we need, but also to buy the new kit, the leading edge kit, to get after the threat that is accelerating at an exponential pace. Right now, there's a capability gap between us and the adversary, and that capability gap is in our favor. But that capability gap is rapidly closing. And what we've got to do is invest to a point that we can stop that gap from closing, but reverse that gap and make it wider.
From an Air Force perspective, I think Secretary Kendall's closing comment, talking about we don't have an innovation problem, we have a resourcing problem, I think really gets to the heart of it. The challenge with modernization is you have to pay for it somehow. And so as we know what we have to do. It's not a particular mystery. Secretary Kendall gave us a good rundown of that. The question is, what is the trade to pay for that? Are we going to take end strength away from the service? And I would suggest we already know that we have some critical shortages in a number of our career fields, security forces, maintenance, aircraft maintenance, among others. And so we don't really want to bring down our end strength, and then you go, well, then what's the other alternative? The other alternative is force structure and readiness. It is the O&M dollars. It's the things that it takes to keep us flying. And we don't want a hollow force. And so it's really the very difficult work in deciding how to modernize is you either have to have more resources, to Secretary Kendall's point, or you have to make very difficult choices within the resources you have. And so that's really what it comes down to.
You know, it all starts with doing the system engineering right up front. We have to get that right, step one. Step two, then we have to get the right acquisition strategy, something that's going to lead to an executable contract, something that we award for a realistic cost and realistic schedule. And then third, we need to execute and deliver on cost and schedule. Every time we overrun a program or we slip schedule and it costs us more money, we're robbing our future to modernize. And we've got to get into the habit of delivering everything on cost and schedule.
Can I build on those two comments? So I want to take it one step further, and the chief kind of started to go there. With this threat, we are never going to go alone. It'll never be the Space Force alone. It'll never be the Air Force alone. Never be the Navy alone. It won't be the Marine Corps. Definitely won't be the Army alone. We are all going to have to fight in a very integrated fashion. That is a completely different way of acquiring our systems that the secretaries are talking about. We have to acquire our capabilities from the start, understanding that they're part of a larger enterprise, and architect that enterprise in. The work that Luke Cropsey is doing under the DAF Battle Management Network is all about networking all this stuff together, but not just within space and air. He's also now looking at it across the joint fight with the Joint Fires Network and integrating in the Marine Corps, the Army, and the Navy into that solution. That's going to be a much larger challenge to us going forward, because it's not only a technology challenge, but it's a culture challenge, which gets back at what Secretary Hunter said. How do I pivot from buying widgets to buying capabilities? That's a mind shift that we haven't done yet.
Well, that's all we have time for in this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.